Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the Forestry, North Carolina Prescribed Fire Workshop series. If you missed part 1, no worries. It is available on our YouTube page if you want to go back and watch it at some point after today. Feel free to do so, and today's webinar will also be recorded and put onto that YouTube page. Before we get started on this great agenda, my name is Dakota Wagner. I work for the Forest Stewards Guild, and I'm a part of Forestry, North Carolina on the Communications Committee. And I want to pass it off first and foremost to Bob Barden to talk about some Zoom housekeeping.
Thanks, Dakota. As Dakota indicated, a little bit of Zoom housekeeping to participate in today's webinar. We want to make it an enjoyable experience for everyone. First of all, if you are having any technical issues or just want to make comments about today's webinars or something like that, we ask that you do that in the chat box. Just type your message in and hit send to everyone, and or to the host and panelists, and we'll see that chat. If you have questions for today's presenters, we ask that you use the Q&A feature. All you have to do is click on the Q&A icon there at the bottom of the screen, and you will be presented with a box to type your question in, and then we will moderate those questions at the end of today's webinar. We do have closed captioning today, so if you need that service, feel free to, you can turn that on by clicking on that option. And then if you need to get our attention for whatever reason, feel free to raise your hand. If it's a technical issue or something like that, you've put a response in the chat box and we haven't gotten back to you, so that we know to address your problem. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dakota.
Great. Thanks, Bob. I'm going to go back to the agenda slide here. Yep, to just see what we have going on today. We have 2 presentations with 2 Jennifers. So pretty excited about that. The first one is with Jennifer Roach with North Carolina Forest Service, talking about the process of a prescribed burn. And our second presentation is with Jennifer Fawcett with NC State Extension. And as you have questions, like Bob said, please type them into the Q&A and we'll get them answered at the end of each presenter's presentation. And if there are more questions, we do have a Q&A session after the official end of the webinar today at 2:30 to 3. So if you have more burning questions that haven't been answered, our presenters will stay on the line and we can answer them then. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our first speaker, Jennifer Roach.
Hi, thank you, Dakota. I'm glad to be on the different side of this today. I'm excited to present to you guys today about the process of a prescribed fire. My name is Jennifer Johnson Roach. I am a district forester with the North Carolina Forest Service. I have been with the North Carolina Forest Service for almost 21 years. And during that time, I have been afforded a lot of opportunities to do prescribed burning, where I am dragging a drip torch, or walking a fire line and eating smoke, or planning out or preparing prescribed burn plans in the process of prescribed burning, as well as executing the burn and being very tired at the end of the day. But so I'm very excited to present to you today. I am by no means an expert, nor do I claim to be, but I have been afforded a lot of opportunities that I'm very thankful for. So prescribed burning is a lot of fun, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I can advance my screen. There we go. Okay, so before we jump into the process, let's go back. So before we jump into the process, I wanted to kind of circle back around. And how do you determine as a landowner whether prescribed burning is right for your property? Well, let's see. What does your forest management plan say? So I wanted to throw that in there because Forester, we did do a series last year on forest management plans and the importance of a forest management plan. And this is one of those important things that you would find in a forest management plan. So if you're asking your question, is this something you can do on your property? What does your forest management plan say? If your forest management plan does not talk about fire or prescribed burning, then call the plan writer or a natural resource professional and ask them about it. And if you do not have a forest management plan, then I'm going to encourage you to go find one, to go get one, go talk with a natural resource professional and determine if prescribed fire is right for your property. And why do you need a forest management plan? Well, if you do not know what you have, then you're not able to manage the property. So you can't use fire as a management tool if you don't even know if it's an appropriate management tool for your property. And once you have gotten a forest management plan and now your goals and objectives for your property are actually written down and stated in that plan, then now you can start learning how fire could be used to help you meet your goals. I can progress my slide here. Okay, so let's just review a few common reasons for using fire in the landscape. There's a lot of different reasons why prescribed fire may be used or why it might be important. The first thing is for site preparation to help facilitate tree planting. This might be done following a clear-cut harvest, and a lot of debris may have been left on the ground, and we want to clean up that fuel or remove that fuel so that tree planting can occur. Or we may be just preparing the seed beds so that a particular tree species can either be controlled or make room so that it could actually grow. Another reason for using fire in the landscape is hazard reduction burning, and that is simply where we are reducing the fine fuels that are found on the forest floor so that we can reduce the chances of a wildfire. And when we talk about fine fuels on the forest floor, and the bottom slide is a slide that you can see the pine needles that are growing on the bottom, on the forest floor is the ground. And the fuel is simply the pine straw, the pine needles, the leaves. In the middle picture, you see that this is a site preparation burn, and the fuel there is the pile of limbs, the pile of sticks and branches. Okay, so other reasons for using fire is to improve wildlife habitat, to reduce some of the woody understory so that you can encourage more of a shrub understory with more grasses and weeds that provide foraging habitat, bedding habitat, seeds for wildlife to eat, and that also draw in insects so that larger wildlife can come in. So in this top picture here, you have an understory, you have a pine story, a pine overstory, and you have smaller hardwoods like this right here that is sweet gum, red maple growing up in there. And if you look on the ground or the forest floor, there's not a lot growing there. It's a lot of pine needles and pine straw. There's not a lot of small, short grasses, bunching grasses, or things for wildlife to hide and find bedding. The other reason for burning will be silvicultural burning. Believe it or not, but you threatened and endangered species. There is a lot of fire being used to remove the competition so that some of our threatened and endangered plants that have been found can continue to regenerate. So we're removing the competition and creating a disturbance. At the same time, it improves regeneration of certain species. And just since this is a statewide webinar, I figured I would try to walk us across the state. Laurel Kays in our first webinar in October had discussed the history of fire in North Carolina. And I encourage you to go back and look at that. But at the same time, if you want to walk across North Carolina, so if we start at the if we start in the coastal plain along the beach, you will find a pine species that needs fire in order to regenerate. So it has pine cones, but the pine cones are what we call serotinous. So they need high temperatures, high heat that you find during a fire to open to spread its seed. Now, if we walk a little further west, we run into the longleaf pine community. That is once again in the coastal plain in the eastern Piedmont. And that was a community that covered more of North Carolina historically. It is used to fire, it needs fire. Longleaf pine is not a fan of competition. So fire helps to reduce that competition for nutrients and resources so that longleaf pine can regenerate. And then if we come further west up to Raleigh and Raleigh west and north, you start picking up another pine, shortleaf pine, which is a wonderful pine here in the Piedmont, but it is also a slower growing pine. It is a longer lived pine. So it doesn't sprout as quickly as another pine that is not actually on here, loblolly pine. And so a fire can clean up the competition, make way so shortleaf pines seeds can actually become established and grow and become a component of the future stand. Now, as we move further west up to the mountains and to the higher elevations, you'll find a table mountain pine, which their cones are somewhat serotinous, meaning that they will still open if they don't. They still need high temperatures, but they will still open. But the fire actually cleans up the competition so that they can grow. And then when we're talking about oak management and trying to manage our hardwood stands and get more and more of a larger oak component, then believe it or not, acorns, as many as you find on the ground, have a hard time and they struggle. And so running a fire in a mixed hardwood stand actually helps clean up that competition, helps clean up that fuel so that the acorns can actually germinate and the cotyledons can actually grow. And at the same time, we can reduce disease. Okay, so that was a lot. I just wanted to circle back around to remind us of why we're here, of why we're talking about prescribed burning, and why folks may want to use this as a management tool on their property. So what is the process of doing a prescribed burn? It is 3 steps. It's three steps. We plan for the burn, we execute the burn, and then after the burn, we mop up the burn. Sounds really easy, sounds no big deal, simple, not a problem. Well, actually it is. So there is what I hope that you will get from today is that there is a lot of work that goes into carrying out a prescribed burn. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. All right, so our first step is the planning process. And this is the most important step. It's the most important step in pretty much anything, right? We want to plan for success. And we're going to build a plan, or what we call a burn plan. And this burn plan is a very site-specific plan. It is a plan that is built specifically for the area that we want to burn. And this applies to everyone, whether you're sitting out there and you're a landowner that has some experience with prescribed burning and you've been burning on your own property, or whether you're a private contractor or you're a landowner looking to hire a private contractor, or whether you're a government agency like me from the North Carolina Forest Service, or someone from the Wildlife Commission or the state parks, land trust, Nature Conservancy, all of these different landowners, this applies to everyone. We have to first build a plan. And what is in this plan? Well, it's a written document. It's like a checklist. But we first want to know several things. Well, we want to know, what are we burning? Number one, are we looking to burn an open field? Are we looking at doing a site preparation burn where we have heavy fuels on the ground and we're trying to facilitate tree planting? Or are we burning inside a forest stand that has a large overstory and we're doing an understory burn? We want to know what species are growing. What are our overstory species? What is growing in the canopy of the forest? What are the heights of those trees? What are the diameters? How big are they? And then we're going to look at fuel loads. So we're going to come back down to the forest floor and we're going to look at the fuel loads. So when we talk about fuel and we talk about fire, we talk about the fine fuels on the forest floor that is going to move or carry that fire. And a lot of times that's your pine needles, that's your pine straw, that's your hardwood leaves, that's small stems and branches. And then we want to ask ourselves, well, how are we going to contain this fire? When do we want to burn this area? What time of year do we want to burn this area? Because that is very important. And the time of year helps you determine or helps you better meet your goals and objectives that you set out at the very beginning in your forest management plan and in your burn plan that said this is what you're looking to achieve. All right. And most importantly, these last two are, where will the smoke from my fire go? So now when we're burning, we're not only affecting our area, we're actually affecting our neighbors. And so it's very important for us to look at, where's our smoke going to go and what kind of wind patterns or weather do we need to make sure that our smoke goes in the direction that we're looking for. All right, so there's a lot on this page and I don't expect you to read all of it, but I just want you to get an idea or see an example prescribed burn plan. This is one plan type. This is what the North Carolina Forest Service, this is what we do when we're going to go out and burn a pine stand, whether that's on state property or whether that's on private property. But this is the type of plan that we put together. It's a 3-page plan. It talks about our forest stand. It sets the objectives. Number one, what are we trying to achieve? Why are we doing this? Why are we putting fuel into the land, or why are we putting fire into the landscape? We also look at sensitive areas, like our smoke sensitive areas. This is important. This is where we determine where's our smoke going to go? Where do we not want our smoke to go? And smoke sensitive areas are things like schools and hospitals, heavily traveled roads, heavily in intersection where there's a lot of traffic, hospitals, retirement facilities. These are all things that we have to look at and consider when we're looking at using prescribed fire. And then we talk about the weather that we need. So we build a plan, and we want to talk about what kind of wind directions do I need so that I can make sure that my smoke goes in the direction that I want, and that that smoke gets up into the atmosphere, mixes, and is then carried off. And then we talk about how many people that we need to carry out the burn. We have checklists such as, do you have a burning permit from the North Carolina Forest Service? Do you have smoke signs on the highway? So there's a lot of checklists that helps the burner remember all of the steps in place that they need to consider before we go out there and light a match. And of course, we have lots of maps. We use a lot of maps, and in this map, you can see at the bottom, you see the words cut over. Well, that was not what we were trying to burn. We were actually burning area 1, and these were small little pine stands that were wrapped around the cut over. And you can see to the west over here is Highway 96. Well, I don't want smoke to go in that area. So in my plan, I needed to make sure that I accounted for that. I want my smoke to go away from that highway. I want my smoke to blow into this forested area where there are no houses or smoke sensitive areas within a half a mile, so that I'm not impacting my neighbors. Okay, and just to touch base on a little bit of this, once again, there's a lot that goes into prescribed burning and into the planning process. And another reason why it's important for us to do a written plan before we do a prescribed burn is so that we're meeting the smoke management guidelines. And in here in North Carolina, we have what's called the North Carolina Smoke Management Program. And this is simply a document that talks about fuel tonnages that are out there on the property. It talks about weather, and it talks about the distance to our smoke sensitive areas. And it breaks it all down into a very simple chart where our certified burners can check these charts, go out and help determine whether today is a good day, whether today is a good burning day or not. And it looks at the amount of particulate matter that you would be putting in the atmosphere. And that's the important part. That's what our neighbors want to know about. In part of this, we also have some really cool programs that we've been using over the last few years. And those are smoke modeling programs. And we have some really cool tools in place that we can put in our weather parameters and put in the times that we are looking to start the burn and end the burn. And we can actually see a picture of where we think where our smoke should actually go in the areas that it may impact. We also have, we need to find weather. So there is a fire weather forecast specifically for wildfires that we also use for prescribed burning. And a fire weather forecast, the National Weather Service, of course, is across North Carolina, and it has several offices throughout the state. And you have to find the office that where your track or what county your track lies in to get an idea of the predicted weather for that day, what is predicted for the afternoon, and what is predicted for the following day. And a fire weather forecast includes other elements that you don't find in the weather from the Channel 3 News or using a WeatherBug app. And it's also based on the worst case scenario. So this is just a weather. There's lots of charts and things that we can use that help us plan our day to where we can see when a wind shift is coming in, or we can get an idea of what the climatologists expect our relative humidities to drop. So there's a lot of things that we want to check in advance and know where to go to find that information. And this weather, you can go to the North Carolina Forest Service website, and over on the quick links, in the green, you can scroll down to fire weather and it will take you to this page. We have lots of tools there. We also have our fire intelligence portal that can help predict, that will show you current temperatures and rain and also predict conditions for the following day. But still, once again, we're in the planning process. All right, so we've got a written plan. We've started writing our plan where we know what type of weather we need. We know where we need to go find that weather that we should be looking at. We have identified our smoke sensitive areas. We have identified where we want our smoke to go. Well, now, how are we going to contain that fire? Are we going to need a fire line? Do we need a fire break? So what is a fire line? And a fire line is a line that breaks the fire. It's something that separates the fuel. It stops the forward progression of the fire. And sometimes landowners may not be real sure what this means. And we can use a lot of different things to help stop the forward progression of our fire as a fire break. We can use natural things like a large stream or a wet area or a swamp area that the soil moisture is high and the vegetation is still green. And as the fire backs down into that, it will die off. We can use field edges if we're burning a forest stand and it is adjacent to a field that has been recently plowed, or it is adjacent to a field that has green grass growing in it, to where the fire would slow down to where a firefighter could get in there and use a wet line. We could use existing fire breaks. We could use established trails or paths that go through the woods roads, power line right-of-ways, and even paved roads. But this over here, we may need to create a new line. And when we create a new fire line, many times we're looking at taking a bulldozer into the woods, and that bulldozer is going to go between the larger trees, but ultimately it is creating a path through the woods, and it's going to push down some trees. It's going to push down trees, it's going to push down your smaller trees, and it's going to push the stump out of the way. We also can do hand line. That is a very intensive process, but that's simply where we use hand tools and we start raking and create a fire line. We also, believe it or not, use leaf blowers. We use a lot of leaf blown lines, and that is where we have high powered leaf blowers to get in there and blow those leaves around, but also get down to that mineral soil. So here's just some examples of that. The first picture on the left is where we took a bulldozer. Apologize, it's blurry, but took a bulldozer through the woods. So this was a new path, a new fire line that was created. And this was actually created using the blade on the front of the dozer. And this is what we call a bladed fire line. It basically creates a path that's a little bit wider, that is a little bit flatter. It's easier to get vehicles, UTVs, four-wheelers down these lines so that it makes it easier to burn, and that we can also get access to more of the property in case we need to take water to a stump. Easy access. The bottom picture is an example of a plowed line, and that is where we're pulling a plow or a bedding plow behind the dozer, and the bedding plow actually sinks into the ground, and as it's dragged through the ground, the root mat is cut and it's rolled over to the side. So that way we're getting down to that bare mineral soil, which is what we need in order to stop the forward advancement of the fire. We are separating the fuels. And remember, the fuels are the leaves, the pine straw, the needles. Over to the right is a recent picture that I got from a crew that was on a Sourtown Mountain, which was a wildfire, but it was at least an example of a small hand line, a start of a hand line. So you can see where they came in and blew some of the leaves out of the way, and they started raking back and trenching to expose that mineral soil. A little bit more intensive, labor intensive process, and it's also a very narrow line. Other examples that we could use for fire lines or here are trails that go through the woods we could burn off of, or here's a woods road that goes through the woods that we may use to burn off of. And then here's an example of a stream that we may use as a fire break. And the point of this is when we're doing a prescribed burn, we are basically blocking in the burn unit. We are creating sides to the area that we want to burn. And on one side, we may be using a large creek. On the other side, we may be using a woods road or a path or a trail. And on the other side, we may have to create a new line through the woods using a bulldozer. And then in many cases, we're using a combination of all of this, where we're using a leaf blower to blow out those lines where we need to. We're using a dozer to create a new path through the woods. And then we're using hand tools to actually connect those lines to our creeks into these sensitive areas where we don't need to put heavy equipment or cause a soil erosion problem. Okay, so we're still in the planning process. So what else do we want to know when we're in the planning process? Well, what time of year do we want to carry out this burn? Very important. We go back to our objectives. What was our goal? What is it that we're looking to achieve? And that will determine when is the best time of year to burn. So we have what we call dormant season burning, which we do in the winter. And we also have growing season burning, which we do early spring into the summer, until full green up happens. Dormant burning, wintertime burning is great to just simply run fire through the landscape and reducing the fuel. It is a great time of year to do a burn in a stand where that has never had fire in it for quite some time, where you have heavy fuels or fuels have built up, or just use the pine straw where the hardwood leaves have built up, and in doing a cool, low intensity burn where the humidities or the relative humidities are a little bit higher, there's a little bit more soil moisture in the ground. It's a little bit cooler, low intensity fire, and that helps us burn that first layer of fuel off. So that maybe future burns in the future, we might actually change the time of year that we do that. Then we have growing season burns. Once again, we're reducing the fuel, but it's also when vegetation is, the spring is the birth, the rebirth of our vegetation. And as things have lied dormant in the wintertime, in the springtime, the buds start to open up. We start to have new little leaflets start to grow on the hardwoods. And all of the resources that were stored in the root system have now been pushed up to the top of the tree. And so if we are looking to control an understory of sweet gum or maple, well, that would be the best time to do that, because those trees are sensitive to that. The buds are just breaking open, it's small little leaflets. It's not expecting that type of disturbance. And this is the time of year that we would also do something to promote different species, such as more oak, trying to remove the competition, and so that those acorns that have been pushed down in the dirt get a little bit of sunlight, get a little bit more moisture, a little bit more nutrients, and those cotyledons can start to grow. So timing of year is also important. Also part of the planning process, we talked about our smoke. We need to know where our smoke is going. And this first picture I took from Google Earth. I think I just got lucky as the satellites were coming over. It looks like a prescribed burn was being done, but you can tell where the smoke is going, and it is moving this southwest winds that are coming from the southwest and moving to the northeast. So when you're reading a weather forecast and someone says we have southwest winds today, that means that is the direction that the winds are coming from. So when we're looking at where our smoke is going to go, we need to know where the winds are coming from and what direction the smoke is going to move. In the center picture, we were using a paved road, and you can tell we did not want the smoke on the highway. So we had to consider that, and we had to come up with a plan and look at the wind direction and the weather parameters to ensure that when we burn this, we were keeping the smoke off of this main road. And then the last picture is just an aerial photography picture. It's hard to see, I apologize, but if you look here in the middle, looks like an open area, and that's actually an old clear cut, but the darker spots are pine areas. And so if I wanted to go in and burn in this pine area, well, the first thing I would notice is there's a school right to the north of me. There's also a heavily traveled road and a very busy intersection. All things that I need to consider before I go out and light the burn. Okay, so planning process, there's a lot that goes into planning. Just like with anything, you need to plan, and you're planning to be successful. So there's a lot going into it. So now we've planned for it, and now we finally reached the day that we can actually carry out the burn. It's time to execute the burn. We're going to go out there and burn. Are we going to go out there and just light a match and say, let's go? No, we are not. A prescribed burning is just that. We have developed a plan, we have developed a prescription, and now the day has come that we have decided meets our plan. It meets the prescription that we have laid out. And now we need to follow that plan. And in part of that plan on the day of the burn is we have to decide how are we going to light the fire. And to keep this very simple, because this can get very overwhelming, and but in simple terms, there's 3 types of fire basically that we would light. We would use a backing fire, which is a type of fire that is going into the wind. It's it backs into the wind. It's a very slow moving fire. Then you have a flanking fire that moves perpendicular to the wind. It's a little bit faster. And then you have head fire. And a head fire is moving with the wind, where the wind is behind the fire and it's pushing the fire. And a head fire is a very fast moving fire. It can become dangerous. So we don't want a lot of that, or we want to control the amount of head fire that we have. And so a simple way to do that, when we are out there on the site preparing to burn today, and we've said, all right, we're here, we've got our crews here, we're gonna do this prescribed burn today. We need to decide what is the wind direction and where at on the track or in the burn area are we going to light the fire. And we're going to use a combination of all of this, really. And what you're using depends on the specific site. Once again, these are site specific, depends on the topography or the terrain and the wind direction. And so we're going to set a backing fire along to help us create a safety zone, to help us improve our fire lines, to make our fire lines wider, to put more black on the ground. Because remember the saying, we fight fire with fire. So when fire runs in, when there's no more fuel, because one fire has already burned it up, it's black. The fuel that was available has now been consumed. As the flaming front comes to that area, it's going to die off because there's no fuel there that is available to burn. So we'll use a backing fire that's very slow and help create wider lines to help us ensure that our fire stays in the lines that we have set in place. And if we look at the bottom example, you can see that the black is the fire and the red is the flaming front, or excuse me, the black is where fire has already been and the flame has died off. This red and yellow is the actual flame. And we come down here along the base and we set fire along this bottom area. And we're just letting this fire back into the wind. Well, if we were looking at 20, 30, 50, 150 acres that we are doing this on, we would be here all day long. So to help facilitate getting this burned and move this along quicker, well, then we're going to use a combination of strips that where we're actually in the top picture, where we're actually creating a little bit of head fire, but we've got this backing fire that continues to back up and move into the wind. And we also come up and set strips that the wind is going to push those strips, and it pushes those strips together. So we're using a combination of head fire and backing fire, and depending on the terrain, we may be using a lot of flanking fire. But this is just another example of one of the things that prescribed burners are thinking about when they go out to do a prescribed burn. It's not as simple as walking out there and let's just light this corner off and hope for the best. That's not at all what a prescribed burn is. So here's just some examples of just different firing techniques or lighting. The first picture is just, instead of using strips where we were dragging a line of fuel or a line of fire, we were actually dropping spots. And the reason for that is this was actually a pretty dry day. It was early spring. You can see the blackberries are already starting to come out and getting leaves. And we did not want to kill our crop trees. Remember, the whole point of a prescribed burn is to help us meet our objectives. And if my objective or my goal is to not kill my overstory trees, then I want to make sure that the fire I'm using or lighting that day is not going to be as intense, that I want to try to get the heat out of the area. I don't want it to be so intense. And in many cases, we dropped spots going along or through our stand and let those spots slowly burn together. In the middle picture, this is an example where we've laid fire all the way through this stand, a solid line of fire or a strip. And then in the last picture, this is in a mixed hardwood stand. And you can see the strip that we've laid out all the way across, and basically laid this out, and we would go up another chain, about a chain and a half. And then we set another strip, and we would allow those strips burn together. But you can see that this is a low moving, slow moving fire. Now, when the two strips come together, it does get a little bit hotter and a little bit more intense, but we're controlling, this is what helps us control the intensity of the fire in a stand. Once again, it's a prescribed fire. I have a goal, I have an objective, and I want to make sure that the fire I'm putting on the ground is helping meet that objective. Okay, so, all right, we burned the track and now we're done. We're tired, we're thirsty, we're hungry, and we can go home. Looks beautiful. Absolutely not. There is still more work to be done. So after the burn, we are going to sit there and monitor the burn. We're going to make sure that we have black all the way around our fire lines. And what that means and what that ensures is that we have burned up the available fuel all the way out to the fire line to better ensure that our fire is not going to escape. We may be cutting down snags that have caught fire. We may be cutting up large logs that were in the stand that were starting to smolder, and we may not want them to smoke. Large, heavy fuels like large trees that are laying on the ground, those things can smoke for a while. So if we can cut them up or buck them up into pieces so that they don't continue to burn, or if we can put water on them to try to get them out, but you need a lot of water for that kind of stuff. And we don't have a lot of water to do that. So we use other things like raking around heavy fuels or raking around snags or putting the snags on the ground so that we are not using a lot of water. But there may be times that we may need to walk the fire line and look at cooling off some stumps or raking around stumps that are continuing to burn that are close to our fire line or our fire perimeter. And we're going to continue to walk the fire line multiple times after the burn is done to ensure that when we go home that night, that fire is going to remain inside those lines. And sometimes you may be able to just, sometimes you may be able to walk it once or twice and feel good about it, monitor it, and then walk it again. And sometimes you're coming back multiple times. And then even after you have lit that prescribed fire, you have done the burn, the days in the future, the coming days, you're still going to go back to that fire and make sure that your fire is inside of the fire line, and that if there may be some more mop up that needs to be done, there may be more stumps or another snag that maybe needs some water put on it, or if we can't get water to it, we'll need to cut it down, but to ensure, once again, that our fire does not escape the control lines. Okay, so this takes us right back to the process of doing a prescribed burn. So the process of doing a prescribed burn is 3 steps. But what I really hope that you got from today is that there is a lot of planning that goes into this. It is not simply walking out there and deciding today, I'm going to burn it. Maybe you did decide today that you were going to burn it, but you have a plan in place that says today is a great day to do it. Today, based on the weather, the fire weather forecast that has been put out and predicted, and comparing that to your burn plan, it looks like an optimal day for you to carry out a burn. And there's a lot of planning, a lot of effort, and a lot of work that goes into a prescribed burn so that we can continue to carry out prescribed burning safely. Prescribed fire is a very effective tool in managing our lands throughout North Carolina. So we want to continue to make sure that we are doing it safely, that we are thinking of our neighbors, but at the same time, we are able to achieve what we are looking to do on that property. Okay, so that's all I have. That's a lot. I hope I didn't overwhelm you. I feel like that's a lot, but there's my contact information. I'm Jennifer Roach, that's me, and my email, and I work in the Hillsborough district here in the center of the state. So, mouthful.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And if anybody has any questions about prescribed fire and prescribed burning, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box and we can get them answered. We have a few minutes for questions. We did get one question, somebody asking what silvicultural means.
Oh, wow. So silvicultural is what we call the art and the science of managing our forest communities. So it's the art of trying to find the right timing to create a disturbance in the woods, the right timing for trees to reap the benefits of the disturbance, or so that but it's the art of science of managing our forest lands.
Great, and it looks like Bob put into the chat box a resource on other terms that you might hear used in the natural resources world. It looks like a glossary for private forest landowners. If you want to check that out, you can. And so if there are, oh, there's another question that came in. How do invasive plants play a role in prescribed burns, and are burns effective for control of invasives?
That's a good question. And the answer is yes and no. Depending on the invasive species, depends on whether they are tolerant. Some invasive species we can kill through fire. But there are other grasses that the fire only spreads, or the fire, a fire cleans up an area and it removes the competition. But for some of our invasive species, now we've actually created a bed that is better for that species to take hold and spread. So yes and no. And that's why it's important to know what's in your stand before you burn it.
Yes, definitely. All right, and looks like those are the questions that we have as of right now. So if we want to get transitioning over to our next presentation, thank you, Jennifer Roach, so much for that. And if anyone has any additional questions that they think of for Jennifer Roach, and then as well as Jennifer Fawcett during her presentation, we will have a little bit of extra time at the end to answer all of those questions. So Jen Fawcett, if you want to start sharing your presentation, we can get started with yours. Oh, and it does look like Laurel Kay's put into the chat box a resource on invasive species and fire, if you want to know some facts about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I want to also thank you all for taking time out of your day to learn about prescribed fire. And now that you've learned all about what a burn entails from Jennifer, I'm now going to share with you some of the resources that are available to you to help you on when you're doing a burn on your land, whether you're doing it yourself or if you decide to hire someone else to do it. So who am I? A little bit just about me. My background's in ecology and forestry. And on the left, you can actually see the first burn I ever participated in. That was in 2010 during my first year of graduate school at Clemson University. I'm not wearing long sleeves like I should be, but now I know better. But what I like is the big space. So I was hooked on fire after that burn, and I've participated in lots of burns since then. Now I work in extension forestry at NC State. In partnership with other agencies and organizations, we conduct a variety of fire-related programs in North Carolina around the entire southern region. You can see some examples here, including programs for landowners to learn how to conduct a burn actually on the ground in the woods, out doing the burns. We also have some online courses. We do some events for the public to learn about the importance of prescribed fire and lots more. So these are pictures from a burn I helped out on a few years ago, and I was curious if anybody recognizes these bison. So you can put it into the chat box if you think you know where this is. The photo on the right is with myself with my colleague Laurel Kays, who also works on wildland fire with me at NC State. She gave a great presentation last month on the history of fire in North Carolina. and also Erin Apple, who's also a wolf packer, and she works at the location where the burn was done. So this was actually an old cow pasture that has been transformed into a variety of habitats, including prairie grassland. And from Laurel's presentation, you might remember as early as 1540, explorers had reported these savannas in the Carolina Piedmont area. Little hint there. In addition to lightning fires and fires set by Native Americans, grazing animals like elk and bison may have actually helped maintain those prairies. And there are some remnant prairies. That's all that's left in North Carolina. But if you want to see this one, you can visit. Did anybody take a guess in the chat? Let's see. No, but it was the Prairie Ridge Eco Station in Raleigh, which is where this burn was. So if anybody's interested in seeing a really cool prairie habitat, you can visit that location. Okay, so here's some things I'm going to cover with you all today. We're going to talk about private lands burning, costs and financial resources, technical resources, and then some educational and training opportunities. And then we'll save some time at the end for any questions. So I kind of wanted to start with, and please feel free, please do type into the chat box. Just I wanted to open it up to you all to see and have you think about kind of what fire means to you. So for some people, it may mean making family memories, providing warmth, a way to connect to your heritage, the wildfires that we've seen out west recently, maybe restoring your land, all sorts of things. And it's different for everyone. So go ahead and put into the chat box kind of what fire means to you. But I just wanted to highlight that fire tends to bring people together. So whatever you're thinking, what fire means to you, somehow, some way it brings us together. So for those of you who have may thought about the recent wildfires, I do want to mention that even not all wildfires are bad. So you may have seen this hashtag for good fire, which is what some people are using to promote prescribed fire. You may have seen it on social media. Areas managed with prescribed fire allow all sorts of things. There's tons of benefits to prescribed burning, and you just heard from Jennifer what some of those are. Could be maybe you want to have recreation activities on your land, hiking, hunting, bird watching. Fire helps to improve all of those. It helps to increase biodiversity, plant species, animal species, improves forage for wildlife, just lots of really great stuff. And there's so many benefits to using prescribed fire. So that's why today I wanted to share with you the resources available to you so that you can help bring fire to your land. And it's really important to bring fire to your land. I want to provide you with some information today on how to do that. Or for those of you who are maybe already burning, some additional resources that maybe you didn't know about. And this is so important because most of the land in the South is privately owned. So as you can see in this bright green color on the map, the South is primarily privately owned forest land. In North Carolina, about 30% of our forests are privately owned. So it's really important for private forest landowners like yourselves to be able to have the resources that you need to get fire on your land. There are some potential barriers to burning. These are just a few examples of obstacles that landowners have expressed that they've had in the past. Weather's a big one, not much we can do about that. But the other items I can help you with today. So some people have said that resources have been a problem. That could be either financial resources or equipment. It does take some money to either hire a contractor or to purchase the proper equipment. For capacity, sometimes if it's just a single landowner or a family, they might not have enough people to conduct a burn safely. Liability is often cited as one of the main reasons that landowners and consultants are unwilling to conduct burns, but really it's more just a fear of the liability than the liability itself, I think. And then finally, some landowners feel that they don't have enough knowledge or experience to safely conduct a burn. And to really feel comfortable, many people, they might go out and watch a burn a few times, then maybe help their family or their neighbors burn a few times. There's some training opportunities available that we'll talk about in a few slides where you can actually also gain some knowledge and experience to help you feel more comfortable, even if it's just understanding why a burn on your property might be useful. So to get a feel from the audience, Bob's going to put up a poll question for us. now. And I'd like to ask you all, how many burns have you participated in? So you can answer the poll question, and then we'll take a look to just see kind of how much experience everyone has, just so I have an idea. So go ahead and enter your answers into the poll right now. We'll give you some time here. Okay, if you want to go ahead and wrap up your answers. And so most people have never participated in a burn, which is great, because the information that I'll be sharing with you today, I think will be really helpful for you to do that. And then the remainder of the experience is pretty variable between 1 and 5, 6 to 10, and more than 11. So those of you then more than 11, great. Feel free, if you know of other things as I go on here too, feel free to put things into the chat box. Be happy to hear from the experiences that everybody on the line has as well. Okay, so for those of you who are brand new to thinking about having a burn on your property, I just wanted to share with you some options. So basically, you can either get some training and experience, and you can conduct the burn yourself. Not all by yourself with help, but you could do it on your own land. Or you can hire or work with a private forestry consultant or an agency like the North Carolina Forest Service. You can also receive some additional technical assistance for things like maybe helping you to write a burn plan or evaluate your property. In some cases in Eastern North Carolina, there's groups called prescribed burn associations that are kind of a combination of all of these things, which I'll talk about later. So one of the first things that people usually ask is, well, how much is it going to cost? So first I'll say that prescribed burning is by far one of the most economical ways to manage your land compared to like herbicide or other mechanical means. So if you've had someone come out and say that, yes, a prescribed fire is possible on your property, then that's definitely going to be the cheapest way to do it. But the cost is really going to depend on a couple of things. So it depends on the answers to these questions, and you'll need to ask yourself, what are my objectives? How many acres is it going to be? What resources do I need? What do I have? Do I have a fire line already there? Is there like a creek or a road that can be used, or do I need to have one installed? Will I hire someone, or will I do it myself? Do I have any financial assistance? What's my terrain like? And depending on your answer to that last one, and depending on where you're located in the state and the type of forest land you own, your costs might differ. You'll also have different opportunities available to you depending on where you are in the state. And typically the steeper terrain costs a little bit more, but some of the financial assistance rates are actually higher to help offset those additional costs. So here's some rates from the North Carolina Forest Service. They are available to assist a landowner with a prescribed burn. So that starts with actually going out and meeting the landowner to look at the area to burn, discuss your options. They can also do the actual burn. Or they could just install the fire lines. They could do both, or they could just provide some advice for you. So they might help you write your burn plan, or make recommendations on when is the best time to burn the property, and to help you meet smoke management guidelines. They might tell you what's the best way to actually carry out the burn for those of you who that might want to do it yourself. So lots of really great things from the Forest Service. You can see the rates there just to give you a sense of what it might cost. These are their 2021 rates. So as you can see, there's different costs for different types of burns. The site prep that Jennifer mentioned, or non-site prep. If you have questions about this, you should definitely contact your local county ranger. You can find that information on the Forest Service website. If you do decide to hire a private contractor, or maybe if you already have a forestry consultant that you're working with who conducts burning, then their rates are going to look a little bit different from this. So one contractor that I recently talked to this week said that his rates range anywhere from, on the low end, $15 per acre for a really simple burn with very little mop up, doesn't need a lot of people, probably a larger acreage. So on the low end, but could go all the way up to $89 an acre for maybe like a more difficult burn that needs more equipment and more people. So it's kind of variable, but he said his rates are typically $25 to $40 an acre on average, just to kind of give you an idea. So here's the list of the various groups that can help you to find financial assistance for your burn. So now you know how much it might cost you, and there are some opportunities that actually provide some assistance to help you pay for some of that. So here's a list of the various groups. I'll go into specific details for some of these in a few slides. So they include the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This is the one that most people tend to use. The North Carolina State Forest Service, the Wildlife Resources Commission, Forestry consultants, prescribed burn associations, which I'll talk about. And there's also some partnerships and other NGOs that could help you. And you can also check with your local cooperative extension office, your county office, or your state forestry agency. Folks, the county rangers might know some other opportunities as well. So as we've talked about in past workshops, every landowner should have a forestry management plan that addresses your unique objectives for your property. And you should do that before you seek out the cost share funding side of things. So if one of the objectives for your land is wildlife, for example, then you might want to contact the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They actually have some biologists who can provide guidance and assistance if you're interested in improving wildlife habitat on your property. So you can see this map here. They break it up by district as to who you actually contact. But I spoke with one of the biologists, and he said that from a wildlife perspective, some of the key programs you might want to look into are the EQIP program and the Conservation Stewardship Program, which are both administered by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And he said it's really important to remember that the programs are competitive. So just because you apply doesn't mean that you're going to get funded necessarily, but they can help you to at least get the application. And if anyone's interested in either of those programs, contact your local NRCS office. Okay, so Bob's going to put a link into the chat box for you. Here are the 2021 payment schedules, how you can find them online. Basically, you go to their website, you just click on North Carolina on the map to see which practices qualify and how much financial assistance available. So this is the cost share rates for 2021. So EQIP is a federal program that provides assistance to landowners to help them perform conservation practices on lands in agricultural production, which includes forestry. So there's a separate pot of money within EQIP that's used to help landowners create and manage wildlife habitat. So those of you, especially in the western part of the state, who are interested in golden winged warblers, for example, you might want to look into that separate wildlife pot. And EQIP will pay for both the actual prescribed burning itself and also for fire break installation. So here's some examples. You can see that rates kind of vary depending on, so just as an example, some of the lower costs that you see here are for the smaller acreages, less than or equal to 20 acres. And then on the higher end, it's for acreages greater than 1,000 acres for historically underserved communities. So the rates do vary based on the type of burn that you're doing and the acreage. And then the fire breaks, you can see also kind of vary a little bit there based on the low end, it was just a really simple disc type fire break. And on the high end for larger equipment, steeper slopes. So for those of you in the western part of the states would be getting some of those higher rates. Okay, so there's a few cost share opportunities for landowners that are offered by the Forest Service too, that I just wanted to share. The first one is the Forest Development Program, which basically pays a percentage, 40% of the actual cost or up to the prevailing rate, whichever is lowest. And landowners can sign up for this program between March and May. So just keep that in mind this coming spring. And the money is allocated by lottery drawing. And then the second one is a flat rate for understory burning, $15 an acre for a tract that's never been burned, or $20 for a tract that's doing a second burn within 5 years. And you can sign up for this one at any time. Monies are allocated first come, first serve until they're gone. And then I did want to mention another program. It focuses on prescribed burning. This won't apply to everybody, but for those of you who live within 10 miles of a national forest, if you live within that boundary, there's another program called the Community Protection Program. It's administered by the North Carolina Forest Service. And it's in really high demand, but it prioritizes tracts to be burned based on the urban interface criteria. So that might just be something to keep in mind if you live near a national forest. And then there might be some other, options available. So your county ranger or your local NRCS agent can help you to find out if there's any other opportunities available as well. So moving on to technical assistance now, here's some examples of groups that can provide technical assistance for you. They include the state forestry and wildlife agencies, private contractors, landowner associations and prescribed burn associations, and then partnerships and NGOs. And again, not to repeat myself, but contact your local extension office or your state forestry agency because they might know of some other opportunities as well. So we already talked about the fact that the Forest Service can conduct the burns for you for a fee, but I just wanted to also, they're not the only option. So you can also hire a private contractor. So if you don't already have a forestry consultant that you're working with that does burning, you can find someone online. Bob's going to put a link into the chat for you, but there's a database we created that houses a list of burners in North Carolina. So you'll just need to go to that link and then scroll down to North Carolina and you can find a burner in your area. And then that site also has some tips on how to actually select a burner. You want to make sure that you select somebody who has the proper credentials and has a lot of experience in burning. So there's some tips on that site on how to actually choose somebody. And then there's also a link to the Forest Service page where you'll see this map where you can look up prescribed burn contractors in your county on the North Carolina Forest Service website page as well. That's all in that same link that Bob put into the chat box. It has all of it in that spot for you. So now moving on to options for training. There's fewer options for people who don't work with an agency or an NGO, but there are some available. So in-person options include workshops, field days, other training events from prescribed burn associations, cooperative extension, the state forestry agencies, NGOs. There's a group called the Southern Fire Exchange. There's lots of opportunities for training. So if you did want to learn more about prescribed burning, you contact any one of these groups and actually get some hands-on training in some cases. So one of the groups that provides this type of hands-on training is called a prescribed burn association, which is essentially a group of landowners and other concerned citizens. Anyone can join, and they form a partnership to basically get together and conduct prescribed burns. This map shows you where all of the PBAs are located across the country. The ones in California just recently popped up over the past 2 years. Those are all brand new, just from a lot of the fire challenges that they're having out there. The ones in North Carolina are also fairly new within the last 5 or 6 years, and they're starting to kind of pop up all over the country now. But really, it's a place where landowners and members, they bring together the knowledge, capacity, equipment, everything they can bring to the table, their time, to help each other. They help their neighbors helping neighbors. They help each other to burn on their land. So there's now more than 70 of them across the country. Some of them are formal. In the case of North Carolina, some are formal, some are a little bit more informal. But there's lots of opportunities that the PBAs provide, including those hands-on opportunities that I was talking about. So here in North Carolina, if you're located in the eastern part of the state, there are 4 of them in eastern North Carolina. There's another one starting to try to form in the western part of the state, but I just want to let you know, these are the ones that are currently established. This is not stopping anybody. Anybody can go out and start a PBA. So if your area is not on this map here, you could go start one, you know, talk to your neighbors. If you're interested in getting together and doing burns together, this is something that interests you, contact me and I could help you potentially form one in your area, or you know, contact your county ranger or somebody in extension in your county, and maybe you could get one formed in your area too. So you can see that there's 4 here, and if you're interested in exactly what counties those are on, you can find those online, but you have the general sense here of the areas that those cover. So like I said, some of them are a little more formal. You can contact the coordinator, get on their email list, and they'll just say, hey, I'm burning tomorrow. Who wants to come to my property? Other ones are a little bit more informal than that, and you just kind of join their Google group, and they have meetings. And but really, it's just a great way to get a lot of really hands-on experience and learn from your peers, and to learn from other landowners what's working on their property, how are they doing their burns. So highly recommend. And you could join too if you're not in one of these areas. If you're willing to drive a little ways, you're welcome to join them. They always like having other people join their burns, and you just got to give them a heads up you're coming, and they'd love to have you, I'm sure. And these are some of examples of the things that the PBAs do. They also go beyond the PBAs. We in Extension have actually hosted 15 plus of these now across the southern region, but they're called Learn and Burn workshops. Hopefully there will be some more in North Carolina in the coming years, and they're essentially workshops for landowners to help them increase their knowledge and comfort. There's not really a lot of opportunities like the agency folks have for landowners to get out there and practice doing prescribed burns. So this is a way for people to get out there, and you have a mentor with you to go with you every step of the way and teach you how to hold a drip torch and how to do the mop up that Jennifer was talking about. And so it just really helps people to increase their knowledge and comfort in using prescribed fire. So if any of those happen next year, we'll be sure to share that out through our Forester network to make sure you all are able to participate. Now I just want to move on to some other educational opportunities that are online. This is a site that we developed back in 2014. It's for those of you who are maybe more of a visual learner. This is a site that has video course. So it's comprised of a series of short videos, 2-3 minutes, some of them, has some readings, has some quizzes. It goes through the entire process that Jennifer just talked about. So how and why to plan your burn, how to actually conduct the burn, how to evaluate the burn, and it kind of goes through that whole process with some videos. The gentleman here in this picture, Jesse Wimberly, is actually the coordinator for that Sandhill Prescribed Burn Association that I was just telling you about. And it was really funny because when we shot this video of him, I was chatting with him and he was telling me about how he burns his land with his neighbors, and they kind of all get together and have some beverages together. And I said, sounds like, that you all have a prescribed burn association. And he said, well, what's that? And so after that, we kind of got talking a little bit more, and he formalized it into a prescribed burn association. And now they have hundreds of people part of this group that he kind of just had started informally with his neighbors. So it's been really cool to see the progression of that group really grow and how successful they've been. And so he's one of the stars of our video course, and he talks a lot about his property. He's located in the Sandhills area. So as part of this course, there's also 360-degree videos where you can see a burn actually taking place that were shot on his land. So now you just have your mobile phones, but if you have one of those little 360 viewers, you could also use that, and you can kind of look around, or if you're on your computer, you can move your mouse up and down and kind of look around and see the smoke in the air and the burn on the ground. So those have been really fun to have in there as part of that. Another course I just want to throw out there is called Introduction to Southeast Prescribed Fire. Bob's going to put a link into the chat. But when you get to that site, you still have to kind of do the search intro to prescribed fire in the search box there. And when you get to that, it takes you to this page where there's all these different modules and you can go through them just like the other video course. There's different sections with quizzes. And so here's some of the topics that you'll learn about in that course. I just want to mention that this course will not get you, if you've ever heard of the term a North Carolina certified burner, this is not connected to that at all. So I'll talk about that program in a second, but this course is just basically intended to provide you with basic information and help you to understand how a prescribed burn works more from an educational perspective. So, you know, the other course, if you're a visual learner, this one's maybe if you're more of like a, you know, if you like to read things, there are some videos as part of this one too, but it's not a video course. So that North Carolina Certified Burn Program that I mentioned is another really great way to learn a lot about prescribed burning. So this would be, I would recommend this for people who you are interested in doing the burns on your property yourself. You want more information, this would be for maybe some of the more experienced folks, because it really is, it's a deep dive into the information. Anybody's welcome to open it or to take it. It's the North Carolina Forest Service offers it, and it's a class for those people that intend to maybe do a lot of burning on your personal property, or if you're a contractor that might get hired to do the burn or burn as part of your job. And it teaches people about smoke management guidelines and burning techniques. And then at the end, so you kind of go through this process that I have here where you attend the class and you have to pass the test at the end. But then after that, there's more. It's not just you take the class. So then you have to actually prepare prescribed burn plan that covers the required items, and you learn all about that in the class. And then you actually have to conduct a burn and under the observation of another certified burner. So you have to get all the proper permits and you know, everything that you actually need. And then another certified burner watches you and then says, yes, this person is ready to become a certified burner. And then when you do become a certified burner, it essentially provides you some liability protection under the state law, so that if something were to happen with your burn, as long as you followed your burn plan and did everything correctly, then you would actually be covered, and it would provide some liability protection. So it is a really excellent tool for those of you who think you might want to be doing your own burning. Like I said, it's a really significantly reduce your liability. Even though you don't have to be a certified burner to conduct burns, but you're not going to receive protection from the Burn Act if you're not a certified burner. So if anybody has questions about that course, I would contact your county ranger. Right now, there is no, I just checked in with them, there's no date scheduled for 2022 yet, but they do offer them several times a year. And right now they are looking into a hybrid option. So historically they would have been all in person. They've done a virtual option. They're going to look into some hybrid options for next year. So just check in with your county ranger on more information about that course. And typically $25 in the past, it's been $25 to take that course. So I realized that was a lot of information that I just provided. Do want to remind you this webinar is recorded, and I believe Bob's going to be providing the slides afterwards as well. So you can always go back and, you know, find some of these things again. I know it's hard to remember all of this. So if you're confused about anything, or if you have questions, you can contact us. You could also reach out to the North Carolina Forest Service, the county rangers, the key contact with the Forest Service for any programs and services offered in your county. So you can see the map here. It's also on their website. So you just choose your, you know, county that you're in, and you can provide, you'll find some contact information for the person for you to reach out to. So and then for any questions, again, about financial assistance, you might want to also check with them or your local NRCS agent. So with that, that's everything that I have. You can also contact us with any additional questions, or if you have them, go ahead and put them into the chat box. And if we don't know, we'll help point you in the right direction. So thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Jen. We had one question come in through the chat box, so I wrote it down so it didn't get lost. And it was somebody asking where they could get a printed copy of the Forest Service, NC Forest Service districts and contract personnel. I think it was one of the slides that you had previously, and someone was wondering if there's a printed version of that somewhere.
I'll let Jennifer Roach answer that question. I don't know if we're ready. If there's no other questions for me, I'll let her answer that because I'm actually not entirely sure. I know you can get to it through the website, but as far as printed versions, I would assume your county ranger would have those, but I'll let Jennifer respond to that.
Yes, so the best place is to go to the website. We do have a printed version of that on, we do have a few brochures that do have all of our districts listed out and our phone numbers just for the district offices. But we do have a few printed publications, but they're not on every publication. They're on particular publications. But we can get one of those for you. But the best place is to go to the website.
Awesome, thank you. And I didn't see any other questions come in, so I did want to share a couple of more things. And as people think about any other potential questions they might have, feel free to type them into the Q&A. We still have some time left. But I did want to say, save the date for our next event. It is not going to be an educational webinar or workshop. It's going to be a social on December 9th. More details are going to be coming soon, but just mark your calendars for that event. And it'll be a time for foresters to get together and chat and just be able to connect and talk. So that is on December 9th. And then other ways that you can connect with us are join our Facebook group. So we have a private group that you can join. You can just search Forest Her North Carolina on Facebook. Make sure you answer the questions that are asked in it, just so we know that you're a real person and not a bot of some kind. We also have an Instagram account and you can follow us there. If you want to join our email listserv, we don't clog your email inboxes. It's pretty much just you get first notice of when these webinars and workshops are being held, and you get the recording in your email inbox as well. So if you want to sign up for that, just send us an email at foresternc@gmail.com. And then our website is coming soon, and you will all hear about that through our email listserv. And then as well, like I said before, our YouTube channel has all recordings of our past webinars available for you to watch if that's something you would like to do. And I think that is, yep, that's pretty much all my slides I got. And so I think I don't see any more questions coming in, but Jennifer Fawcett or Jennifer Roach, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share?
Just that if people do think of, questions afterwards, on for a little bit longer now too, if people want to stick around, if they don't want to do it in front of this larger group, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer. And if you think of something after the fact, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to help later too.
Yes, I second that. Thanks for having us today. And if anyone has any questions, sometimes for landowners that are not familiar with what a prescribed burn will look like on their property, particularly with installation of fire lines, I'd be more than happy to talk with someone about that and explain that process a little more. But thanks for having us.
Yeah, and thanks again to you both for some great presentations. And we'll all stay on the line. If anybody does have any other questions they would like to ask, we will stick around. But if not, have a great afternoon.
It's a lot of information to put in.
I still see 20 plus people on the line, so don't be shy if you still have questions.
We'd love to hear it. We can definitely tell you that today, depending on where you are, is not a day for prescribed burning. The wind is howling here.
Yeah, here too.
We are fighting wildfires instead of prescribed fires. Maybe we will get some rain very soon.
Yeah, I just heard from someone in the Southern Group of State Foresters was saying that the wildfire potential for this fall looks pretty high too. So for those of you with the forest land, just beware this fall. There might be some wildfires coming through. Bob, somebody just put in about the evaluation. Did you send that link out to the evaluation?
A email will go out to all the registrants with a link to the evaluation, as well as then all the links and stuff that was shared in today's webinar.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Karen, for checking in on that. And thank you for, I'm assuming you'll fill it out since thank you for doing that. It's always helpful for us to get feedback from folks. Anyone else? Oh, I do see. This is a question for you, Jennifer, in the Q&A. What percentage of privately owned timberland is prescribed burn at some point during the life of a planted stand?
Wow, it's a good one. Percentage of privately owned timberland is prescribed burn at some point during the life of a planted stand. Ooh, I honestly could not tell you. I could not give you a definitive number. Off the cuff, as a simple guess, I would say maybe 15-20%, if it's even that high. But I don't know. I don't know.
I'll add on to that. Yeah. And I think it depends too on what type of timber you're talking about. Because if it's longleaf pine, that's going to be a lot more frequent. It's going to need fire to get in there. Whereas another species like loblolly pine is going to be a lot more infrequent. So it depends on the type of tree you're talking about. So if you have, whoever asked that question, if you had a more specifics on, like, if you were looking for something in particular about your tract, somebody might be able to help you with that. But yeah, it's kind of variable, I think, depending on lots of things. It's another one of those, it depends, even though it's not really an answer.
But that's actually a great conversation. One thing we didn't talk about is it's really a prescribed fire program. So we actually do want to see the first burn done, but the first burn may not achieve the objectives that you're setting out. So it may be that 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, you need to come back and do a burn. And that depends on what you're managing for. It depends on the stand that you're trying to move fire through, whether it's a mixed hardwood stand, whether it's a shortleaf white oak stand or a longleaf pine stand. But setting out with a prescribed burn program for your property is where you start to really meet your objectives. Doing running one fire through the stand and then walking away, if that was site preparation burning, that would be fine. But burning in the understory is very different, particularly if you're managing fields or open fields and you're trying to manage early successional habitat. It's an open field, but that's still where you're going to go into that area multiple times every 3 to 4 years.
And she did just come back and say loblolly is what she was talking about specifically. So I don't know if you have anything to add based on that now.
So I mean, loblolly is different. Loblolly doesn't need fire to grow, but it definitely helps improve and make our loblolly pine stands a little more diverse and try to encourage more of a shrub understory. So people that are going into a pine plantation and burning maybe 2 to 4 times over the life of that stand, I would say is very low. But people that are doing one burn and walking away is a little bit higher, but still I wouldn't say 15–20%, but that's just with my experience around here. Anyone else? Calling? Well, just don't forget, if you have more questions, you can always send us an email, or if you wanted to talk with someone in the Forest Service per se, then you can contact your local county ranger. And then I'm sure we got Deanna on here from Wildlife Commission. You can contact a wildlife biologist if you have questions about what prescribed fire does specifically for specific wildlife species. Maybe you're a birder versus a hunter.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate everyone sticking around and asking a couple more questions, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you all for the social event next month. Thank you.
Yeah, for folks still around, information will go out about that soon.